for at least two semesters a couple of years ago. We just couldn't help but do this. We talked about, or rather you did, because the articles we chose invited you to talk about it, we talked about this, the glut of grapes in the wine industry and the expected or anticipated impact on the individual firm operating under the assumption of pure competition. So what have we discovered here? We discovered that since about 1995, around about the time, surprisingly, the Grange Hermitage was actually voted the best red wine ever made by any company anywhere in the world, in the history of mankind. And the world took on this massive love affair with Australian wines, and that pushed the price of grapes significantly higher. So the price mechanism did its job, but it did it so well, there appeared to be just an absolutely unabated development with respect to vineyards popping up everywhere. So ultimately, ladies and gentlemen, what we call a glut of grapes is a massive oversupply. In other words, over the last 7 or 8 years, the number of growers producing grapes has actually increased enormously. So ultimately, what you can see on the right-hand side, this is the market for grapes. The number of producers entering this industry, ultimately, when the grapes had matured to their 4th or 5th year such that you can get a commercially viable crop off them, once all of these grapes hit the market, there clearly is a glut. What you and I would call an oversupply. I mean, there it is right there. There's the surplus. There's the surplus at the old price. And of course, the equilibration process determines that the price will be a lot lower. But guess what? The individual firm is a price taker. They have to take the price the market throws up. Now, what's going to happen here? Well, firstly, if the firm continues to produce a quantity of output equal to QM, it is clearly making significant economic losses because it's receiving a lower price. Its total revenue falls to the lower of the two rectangles. Its total costs remain at the higher or the original. So clearly they are making losses. Now, what they actually do depends largely upon where their average variable cost lies. I'll get through that in a second. But in terms of our analysis here, what is the likely outcome, do you think, of this particular scenario? Well, the likely outcome, ladies and gentlemen, is that for some individual firms, it is no longer profitable to devote their time, effort, endeavour, expertise and resources to this area of production. They will simply exit the industry. And as they exit the industry, as they rip up their vines, as they turn their endeavours to other forms of, presumably, agricultural activity, as they exit the industry, what we find, of course, is that the grape crop, the vintage, if you like, starts to diminish. So over a period of time, as firms exit the industry, as they exit the industry, price is eventually forced, if you like, back up. and of course the losses are dissipated and companies return to possibility what we call normal profits. Now this does throw up an interesting possibility for the firm, and what I said a minute ago is something we actually need to look at, and it's this. You and I both know that ATC embodies both AFC and AVC. In the scenario we've just looked at, the individual firm is initially producing a quantity of output equal to QM under conditions as such. Then there's a slump in market price. So if there's a slump in market price, you can imagine on the right-hand side of this model, price is falling, ergo demand, average revenue and marginal revenue are also falling. And as it falls, the firms begin to experience what we've just talked about, namely the emergence of economic losses. Next question. What would they do? What do you do? Well, ladies and gentlemen, the answer to that really lies in how far does the price fall? If it continues to fall, but it is still above minimum average variable cost, the vast majority of firms will continue to, what we call, hang in there and continue to operate. It's my experience and my belief, and your textbook espouses this particular belief as well. When you are in business, you generally find that you invest a lot of emotional energy into your enterprise, and you don't want to give up easily. Most people that I know actually hang tough and intend to fight it out, or ride it out rather. And certainly from an economic viewpoint, it is possible to do so, as long as you are covering your minimum average variable costs. However, if the price fall is such that average revenue, marginal revenue fall to a level lower than minimum AVC, the firm can actually minimise its losses by closing down. The firm can actually minimise its losses by closing down. Now, of course, if the firm is following the MC equals MR profit maximising rule, then this firm, every time marginal revenue is falling, this firm would actually be cutting back on production. And it would continue to do so. And that's an intelligent business response, because as you curtail production, you obviously are outlaying less in the way of costs. But if you cannot cover your minimum average variable costs, you are simply not viable, ladies and gentlemen. And your best response in this particular case, in order to minimise your losses, is to actually close down and offer nothing for sale at all. And then, of course, all you'll be experiencing in the way of losses is your fixed costs.